people with real jobs.
Hello?
Self-employed people. Which do you want to be? This is Certifiably Unemployable. It's time to fire the boss and become self-employed. Maybe you need a push to get that business or side gig going that you've been dreaming about for years. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can listen to stories and get experience from people who've done it. Get ready to change your life. Broadcasting from the compound, this is Certifiably Unemployable, and this is Sean Dean.
Welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. I am your host, Sean Dean, and thank you once again for joining us this week as we are entering into a brand new year, 2021. A lot of exciting things going on in the world of being an entrepreneur. They always say the first quarter of the year is the biggest time of the year for people to start their own business, whether it be home-based, whether it be just expanding upon the company that they're already building. So we're excited to be here. And today, specifically, I believe you're the youngest, if not one of the youngest entrepreneurs we've had on our show. So I, of course, want to commend you for that. We've got Brenden from MasterTalk, which is a YouTube channel, which he started to help the world master the art of public speaking and communication. He coaches purpose-driven entrepreneurs on how to master their message and share their ideas with the world. So today we're talking about how to master the art of public speaking. Brenden, welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure is mine, Sean. Great to be here.
All right, fantastic. So again, kudos for being a young entrepreneur, for understanding that there's a better life building your own business than working for somebody else. Now, with that being said, I do have a lot of respect for the employee-driven people, the people that can, dedicate and be loyal to somebody else as far as building a business. That's obviously not where I sit in my world, but I do have tremendous respect for those people. So I don't want to feel that we want to leave them out, because even in the corporate America, even in the world of being a successful manager, regional manager, leader within a company, even if it's your own company, public speaking is super important. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Completely agree. And the way that I think about this, Sean, is that public speaking is not just about presentations. It's everything that you do. From the tough conversations that you have with your loved ones, to the long dinner conversations you have with your old friends, to date nights, to business negotiations. Every interaction you have in your life is communication.
So what made you get interested in this topic? I mean, from your upbringing, where did you come from? What's your story? How did you get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start at the beginning. So I'm born and raised in a city called Montreal up in Canada. We essentially all live in igloos. And Montreal is an interesting city in the sense that most people in the city speak multiple languages, French being a required language within the city. My parents looked at me when I was 5 and they said, well, Brenden, you got to learn the language, buddy. So they threw me into a French education system. Thank God for that, because now I speak the language. But the process wasn't so fun, because not only was I uncomfortable with presentations like most of us, I had to give presentations in a language I didn't even know. So you can imagine the stress that I had as a 7th grader, as a 1st grader, standing up there and looking at the crowd and going, bonjour. That was my life for pretty much most of it until I went to university. And then when I went to university, I started competing in these things called case competitions. So think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys my age were playing soccer, football, basketball, clearly things that weren't up my alley. What I did instead is I took that same competitive spirit and applied it to presentations. So in 3 years, I presented 500 times, coached dozens of people on how to speak. And by the time I joined corporate Canada, I guess in my case, I just asked myself the bigger question of life, which was, how do I make a difference in the world? What do I do to make a bigger change? And I noticed a lot of the public speaking content was really bad on YouTube. So I started making videos in my basement. One thing led to another, and here we are today.
Wow. So where did MasterTalk come from? What made you feel that you needed to put your passion into the industry of public speaking?
Right. And this is more of a general insight for people who are listening, especially for those of you who haven't figured out what your business is, what your side hustle is, what your idea is. All great ideas almost always stem from controversy. So let's say I told you 10 years ago, or even 15 years ago, Sean, that you were going to go into strangers' houses and pay them money to stay there. You would have called me crazy. But today
Right,
that's Airbnb, right? Millions of
right,
people do that pretty much on the
right.
daily. That same analogy applies to everything that you do in your life. What are some of the things that you think is true about the world, that is true about society, that most people think is wrong? So for me, one of those insights was related to communication. I felt that most of the people on the platform didn't actually know what they were talking about. Even if they were veterans of communication, even if they had 20 years of experience, they weren't simmering down that content, that insight in a way that a 6-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 23-year-old, or even a 60-year-old would understand the content who isn't very familiar with public speaking. And here's an example. Most of the content is very academic. These are the three different types of communication styles: verbal, nonverbal, sequential, and all that stuff. You're just like, what's going on? Versus when I speak, I ask simple questions like, how would the world change if you're an incredible speaker? This is a question very little people have even thought of. And that's what gets you on the journey to actually take action on this skill.
Hmm, that's a good point. So, what would you feel is the biggest challenge that people face when it comes to public speaking?
Right. So there's definitely many of them, like insecurity, fear, and the like. But I would say the biggest one is probably understanding how to practice public speaking properly. So I have a method that I use called the puzzle method, and I'm happy to explain that further. So public speaking, in many ways, Sean, is like a jigsaw puzzle. You know those 1,000-piece puzzles you kind of put together with your family, especially
Right,
during these times.
right.
So if I asked you, Sean, as you're working on these puzzles with your friends, your family, which pieces do you start with first and why?
Normally, the outer edge. Only the reason why I start with the outer edge is because to me it's simple, because you can see that you've got the straight edges, right? So that's where I would start.
Absolutely, and that's what most people say as well. And
Right.
that's right, right? Start with the corners. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, why don't we do that in public speaking? We have a presentation in 2 days, so what do? We shove a bunch of content. In other words, we start with the middle. Then we present, and then we get to the last slide, and it sounds something like this. Yeah, so thanks. And that's 93, 95, pretty much all presentations that we hear.
Yeah.
So the puzzle method is simple. Start with the edges first. Present your introduction 50 times, not 3 times, not 5 times, 50 times. It won't take you that long. It's a minute, right? Do the same thing with the conclusion, because what's a great movie with a terrible ending? A terrible movie. Same thing. 50 to 100 times, do the conclusion. And then you'll look at yourself, because you've never done that in your life, and say, wow, I'm really good at this public speaking thing. Let me tackle the middle now with that confidence. But much like the 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, who does puzzles alone? That's boring. It's daunting. It's not really fun. So my suggestion is do it with a team. You don't need a speech coach to do this. Do it with a bunch of friends. Even to this day, as a professional speaker, I practice all my keynotes with my buddies. So I encourage you all to do the same.
Okay. Okay. Now, as far as generational advice, when it comes to the younger entrepreneurs, you've got the millennials, and you've got Generation X, which is myself, and you have the baby boomers. Do you feel that they treat the whole art of public speaking differently, and should we communicate with them differently? And can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely different nuances between different generations. But I think the main insight that I would love people to to implement is, we all have the systemic issue. And that systemic issue is the way that we all grew up learning public speaking in the first place. So a lot of my clients stem from millennials all the way up to 55-year-old Fortune 500 executives. And what I've seen across all the board is the same. We've all been taught the wrong way on how to perceive public speaking. So let's say you're in high school, you're in college, you're in university. That's where you learn all of your presentation habits, because we don't wake up one morning and say, hey, Sean, you want to get breakfast and present all day? It's not a thing. Every time we present, it's almost always mandatory. And in that school environment, whether you went through the education system in the 80s or today, it's the same 3 things that appear. 1, you never get to pick the topic. And if you do, it's generally something you're not passionate about. 2, students don't tend to want to listen to you, not because they don't care about you, They love you. Everyone loves us. We're great people. The issue is they're presenting 10 minutes after you. So they're not paying attention to what you're saying. They're worried in their own head.
Right.
Number 3, teachers. Teachers are very well educated, very well intentioned, got a lot of respect for teachers, but they're also very stressed. If you have 60, 70 students now in a classroom these days, and you got to go through all of them one-on-one, you have no time to coach them. And this behavior gets perpetuated, gets repeated in every subject in school, math, sciences, languages. So we're taught to believe that public speaking is a chore. So the main remedy here for everybody across the board is to change the perception that we have of communication from a chore, a daunting task, to a privilege, to a way to share an idea, to a way to make a difference, which is exactly what you're doing with this very podcast.
Okay, so that would be your overall advice for everybody, worldwide, nationwide, wherever, correct?
Exactly. And just breaking that down by generation, the way I think about this is very simple because I don't like, oh, Gen Z does this, Gen X does that. I don't think that's useful to generalize for an entire group of people. But I think the better approach is not just to think about your audience, but to obsess over them. There are so many content creators, business owners that I see out there, whether you're 15 years old, you're 55 years old, who are getting started and don't have long dinner conversations with the 7 people that are buying from them. I think that's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? If you have 7 people that are buying from you, instead of using Google AdWords or trying to figure something, go talk to those 7 people and figure out why they're buying from you. Who are they? What are their dreams and aspirations? What are they thinking about at night? What are they trying to achieve with their life? And through those insights, you're able to find the lining threads of your own industry. And I'm happy to comment on mine. When I was talking to a 6-year-old once and I was starting my speaking career, I realized one important question, which was the most important question that she asked me, that I didn't have an answer to. The question was, what's a CEO? And I just went, that's a good point. What is a CEO? Why am I even talking about this? It's useless to what I'm saying.
Right.
So essentially, the insight that I got that nobody in my industry got is stop talking about jargon like glossophobia and all the different academic terms of communication. Simplify it. Use puzzle analogies because everyone is going to appreciate it and everyone is going to be convinced that they can do it too.
Well, they always say the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, or keep it stupid, simple, whatever, but it's the same concept. And when you're in a group of people, especially as a successful entrepreneur, you always want to assume that everybody in the room is smarter than you. And that's why you want to get around and talk to people. You want to listen to their stories. You want to understand what they're going through. Because if you feel that you're the smartest one in the room, you're never going to grow. You're never going to expand upon where you're at, right? And so why even step into the room if you're going to be closed-minded? So that's a great point. So if we wanted to improve our public speaking right now, what could we do today? What could we do tomorrow to better our public speaking?
Right. So puzzle is definitely something that you can take to the bank and use that for every presentation for the rest of your life. That's already a 10x improvement. So here are some other tactics you can use. One exercise I do with a lot of my executive clients is something I call the random word exercise. So essentially what you do is you pick a random word, and this is something you could do on your own since we can't really come together as a group now, and you just make presentations out of thin air. So let me kind of show this. So Sean, why don't you give me a random word?
A random word. Unemployable.
Sure. Awesome. So now I got to make a presentation of thin air. So here I go. 2020 has been a tumultuous year for all of us. For some, it's been the greatest, and for others, most of us, it's been chaos. That's also true with the job market. Many people who thought that they would be safe, that they had the best job, suddenly found themselves without one. And the people that thought that they had everything together suddenly became a mess. But there's some people, a small group of people who got laid off, who realized that they were unemployable before they got fired, and they knew that their calling was to do something different. They knew that what they wanted to achieve in life had nothing to do with having a job, but rather creating their own. So I encourage you, I urge you all to not just think about being unemployable in the sense that I can't get a job, but rather using that same word, that same insight to think the opposite. to think because I'm unemployable, because nobody wants to hire me, means one thing. It means I need to hire myself and take my own decisions and make my own path towards freedom. That's exactly what we'll be doing in today's presentation. So that's just a good example of something completely random.
I'm Sean Dean, and I approve this message.
I love that. That was a great.
No, that was good. That was good.
I love
Very
it.
good. Very good.
So 3 things I want to point out there that I always like talk about. One, don't ever compare yourself to me. It's a losing battle. I've done this 2,000 times. I'm a slave on podcasts. Even when I don't want to do the exercise, I need to show that I'm credible. So even when I don't want to practice, I have to practice. Number 2, all I'm asking for is 5 minutes of your day. Not 5 hours, not 5 days where you're just practicing all the time. 5 minutes. Orange juice, tree, bark, something. Make presentations. Number 3, understand why the exercise matters. A lot of you are probably listening to us right now and saying, well, Brenden, why would I talk about orange juice for a minute? This is so childish. Let me explain why this is important. It's more for mindset change than anything else. Right now, you're going into your boardrooms, your classrooms, your presentations, and you're scared to present a subject that you know everything about. So when you start practicing with words like nail polish that I've gotten in the past, or unemployable, or camera, when you go back to your subject matter expertise, that presentation that you once feared suddenly becomes a joke.
Well, it also would expand your vocabulary. It allows your mind to sharpen because now you're thinking of things you normally wouldn't think about. And as an entrepreneur, when you're presented with these problems from an employee or from a client or from a vendor, us as leaders have to find the solution, right? So I like that technique because I can see where it would really help you sharpen your axe, not just for the new entrepreneur, but for the seasoned entrepreneurs, because I can guarantee you a lot of people listening right now, they're like, I've never thought about that. So thank you for that. Thank you for that advice. So why do you think people struggle so much with public speaking?
Right. So one piece of that is definitely the way that we learned public speaking. If we grew up in a system where 100% of all of our presentations are mandatory, it's never something we like to do, and it's something we're always constantly being graded on, whether it's at school or at work. Because if it's at school, it's tied to a grade, and if it's at work, it's tied to a result. And whenever we fail at that job, we get punished for it. So that's definitely a big piece of why we're scared of public speaking. And a good counterpoint to that, another analogy I want to give, is a girl like Julia. Let's say she's 14 years old and she loves theater, but she's an introvert. Why does that make sense? It makes sense because her perception of public speaking in the context of theater is completely different. She would say something like, wow, theater allows me to share my ideas creatively, to make a change, to make people laugh, to entertain people. But she doesn't have that same point of view about her history presentation, right? So for you who's listening, who's maybe a seasoned business owner, someone who's been in entrepreneurship for a long time, or someone who's just getting started, you need to use that perception to your advantage. So if you have your own podcast, you have your own content, or better, you're pitching your business all the time to employees, investors, people of the like, you probably care about that business. You probably care about those ideas. So the key is to just keep refining it from the perception, from the lens of saying, this skill allows me to share that idea to millions of people rather than the 10 people around me.
That's a great point. And coming from a person that has a background of theater, there are more introverts in the theater than you would think. And that's one of the things that I love about the arts and theater is it really is a judgment-free zone. And so it allows people to open up differently than they would otherwise. Because I think one of the biggest fears in daily life, not just public speaking, is we're always worried about being judged, right? And telling yourself, stop worrying about what other people think. It's a lot easier said than done. So you have to keep doing these things like what you're mentioning to build up the confidence, to understand that yeah, you're passionate about it, but you have to feel 100% confident that what you're saying is on point.
Absolutely. And just building on that,
Right.
because I love that. The fear needs to always lose to the message. That's how you overcome the fear. There's no secret. Right. I'm still scared of a lot of the presentations I get. Remember, just so everyone knows, I started coaching executives, C-suite level executives, when I was 23.
Mm,
Why would
yeah,
they listen to me?
right.
Right? Why
Absolutely.
would they? The reason is because I was prepared. That's the obvious one. I just prepped a lot more than anyone else in my industry. But the other part that's very important for people to take away is it wasn't about breathing or drinking a glass of water. That's not where confidence comes from. It comes from a belief system and a point of view about the world that you have that needs to come true. Was I scared to coach my first executive people? Absolutely, right? It's like
Yeah.
what? It's lots of imposter syndrome. But I believed in a world where every single person who wants free access to communication tools should have that access. And the only way to produce the quality that I do on YouTube, I need to spend quite a bit of money. And the only way to get that money is to coach executive clients. So I'm going to figure this out, not because I'm confident, not because I know what I'm doing, but more in the sense of like, oh, like not because I'm scared, but because the message for that group of people is more important than the short-term fear, especially if I know what I'm doing, right? So that's the secret to confidence.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. So with what we do in our business, you know, we think about public speaking, being in a room full of people, but now, especially coming out of 2020 with the whole pandemic, with the whole, now we're doing more interaction through Zoom and through online presentations and different things, which maybe Zoom will give me a little thumbs up for mentioning them on here. I appreciate that. However, shameless plug, right? But how can someone present better online? And is there a difference between how they do their presentation online and in person?
Absolutely. So the biggest difference between in-person and online presentations is this idea of gauging the reaction. So let's say I'm in person, I'm presenting to you, your company, the people around you, and I'm giving a workshop on public speaking to your family, let's say. If I say a joke, two things are going to happen. One, you are either going to laugh at the joke and say, "Oh, Brendan's such a funny guy," or two, which is much more likely, you're going to look at me and say, "Man, this guy is not funny. Why is he saying jokes? Makes
That
no
was a
sense."
dad joke, Brenden. Yeah.
Right there. But either way, I can gauge the reaction in real time, and I can say, "Oh, I guess I'm not funny. I need to change my tune. I need to adjust the way that I speak." You don't have that privilege in the online world. That same joke that you said in person with the same amount of energy, the same amount of positivity, and the same amount of enthusiasm, you need to say that joke and assume it's funny. Why? Because you can't tell anymore how people are reacting to. Even in this very conversation we're having right now, Sean, I have zero clue how you're reacting to me in a one-on-one conversation. Why? Because I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at the camera lens directly. So I give the illusion that I'm always looking at you. And that's the challenge. When you have 20 little screens on a Zoom call, you need to assume that everything you say is magical. So how do you do that? Two ways. One, create your own Zoom call outside of the actual meeting and have a bunch of people who are critical join the call. Doesn't need to be a lot to criticize everything about you, from the way that you're dressed, from the way that you show up, to the way that you use your mic, and obviously your presentation. So when you get into that online boardroom, you ace it. The second part of that is always assume good intention from your audience. When I started podcasting for the first time, it was really bizarre, Sean. There's essentially a stranger who's asking you questions about your life. You're kind of just like, why are they asking me so many questions about my life? But over time, the perception of that audience changes as you get more and more positive feedback. Hence why the dinner conversations with your fans, your clients is so important. So it goes from who is this Sean guy to wow, Sean's putting a lot of work into this podcast. He's really empowering other entrepreneurs to start their own business. I'm going to assume he's a great guy, and I'm going to assume as if I've known him for many years, which is exactly the conversation we're having right now.
And you don't have to worry about what you wear so much when you're online too. So that's always nice, right?
That's
As long as your shirt is presentable, it's good. So
as long as you have a shirt, it's good.
that's right. That's right. Well, Brenden, we appreciate your input today. And as you're listening to this, don't forget to leave your comments, and if you have any questions, maybe you can reach out to Brenden directly. We're going to go ahead and give you that contact information here in just a bit. You can reach out to myself. I can connect the dots between you and Brenden. We are speaking to Brenden. He is the owner of MasterTalk, which is a YouTube channel. that embraces mastering the art of public speaking. So, Brenden, we do appreciate you once again for being a part of Certifiably Unemployable. So before we wrap it up, is there anything else you wanted to give us as far as some tidbits or anything, as, again, we're starting a brand new year here, and whether you're listening to this podcast right when it first airs or you're listening to it down the road, these tips and tricks can always be effective. So is there anything else you have for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to leave it with my favorite quote, which is as follows: be insane or be the same. If you made it this far into the conversation, you're still listening to what me and Sean have to say for some reason, then the only advice that matters is the following: the people who do great things are the people who have learned the art of insanity. Don't you find it odd that a 22-year-old started a YouTube channel in his mother's basement, not on vlogs, not on pranks, not on comedy skits, like most normal 22-year-olds? He started on executive communication and public speaking tips, went on to coach C executives at 23, but also still lives in his mother's basement and doesn't plan on moving out anytime soon. It makes all of these bizarre decisions with his life. How do any of those decisions make any sense at all? And that, my friends, is the point. When every decision that you make makes sense to the only person that matters, which is you, you're probably making the right decision.
That's a great point. So many people have looked at me as an entrepreneur and said, what are you doing? I'm like, listen, I have faith, and I don't know what the other side of it looks like, but I'm going for it. So great advice. Thank you. And I love those final thoughts. So how can people reach out to you? And is there anything you can offer to people as they reach out to you for advice or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, absolutely. So one easy way to get a feel for my content and what I do is definitely the YouTube channel, which is MasterTalk in one word. Very easy to find. And if you want to send me a message directly, the easiest way of doing that is always Instagram. So my handle there is Master Your Talk.
Master Your Talk. Okay. And we will put the links to your channel and to everything within this podcast. Again, if you're watching us on YouTube, you just click over to his channel, click back over to my channel. Don't forget to subscribe on his channel, subscribe on my channel. We're entrepreneurs. We're all in this world together, and we've got to have each other's back. So I appreciate you being a part of Certifiably Unemployable. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sean. Really appreciate it.
All right. Don't forget to like, subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time.
You've been listening to Certifiably Unemployable. Ready to fire the boss yet? You're on your way. Sean has been self-employed for over 20 years. So if that's something that you want to do, something you've been dreaming about for years, Sean has all the knowledge, good, bad, and indifferent. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook and Instagram at Certifiably Unemployable. Find us on YouTube and at www.certifiablyunemployable.us.net.org and .info. Till next time, this is Certifiably Unemployable, signing off.